What's up everyone, my name's Mono Mythical, and today I'm going to be reviving a dead trend. As you can see, we're going to be ranking TV shows and movies from a little franchise called Transformers, something that I grew up with and still have some level of respect for. So before we put all of our victims to trial, we should establish the criteria for their judgment. First up, at the very bottom, haven't seen yet. Pretty self-explanatory. Some of these I legit haven't seen. You might be asking, well, why put them on the tier list? Shh, I can do whatever I want. Next is Ultimate Sigma. This is the lowest of the low on the scale. Cringe-inducing content. It goes beyond cringe. It transcends cringe. This is content that's so vile, so putrid to the eye, so offensive. It makes drinking bleach seem like a pleasurable activity. You've got Beta, right above Ultimate Sigma, not quite as vile or ridden with a foul stench, but still pretty bad. Passable tier, it's passable, gets the job done, it's something to watch, You might feel like you wasted time, you might not, but there's some littered good elements throughout that you can salvage. Next up, you've got Succulent, a step up from passable, pretty good, there's some tasty licks to be gotten out of it, but just all around, not a fully cohesive dish. And finally, the all-coveted mythical tier, named after yours truly. This is your S tier. This is the pedestal on which the first place winners in the Olympics stand upon. But for the movies and shows we'll be judging. So let's see how these all stack up. Alright, so first up we got the original Transformers G1, as they call it, cartoon. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you, it's a good watch at times. The animation is respectable. It looks like it's from the 80s, as you would expect. I think it gets a little bit more praise than it deserves. And I know that if Transformers fans see this video, they're going to viciously attack me, but you gotta understand, I'm trying to look at this as objectively as possible, with some insertion of opinions here and there, like sprinkles atop a cupcake that's well iced. So when it comes to this show, it's fine. I think it's entertaining, it's a little absurd, it has its moments of comedy that really just kind of work, and then it has its moments of comedy where it's like, that was really awkward. It's also well known to be ridden with animation errors. The writing ain't particularly the best, but it is a kid's cartoon, so maybe it gets a pass, but I think overall it's probably passable tier. Alright, next up we got the movie associated with said cartoon. The Transformers, the movie. The movie is definitely in the same vein of the cartoon. It does have its animation errors, the writing isn't really the strongest. They were kind of going for a twist on like the Star Wars formula a bit. A couple scenes where all the Autobots are, at war with the Decepticons are really great. Galvatron is by far the highlight of the movie for me. I think he as a character is particularly interesting. How he's enslaved by Unicron and like sort of, playing for his own ends while also serving his master. I think there's a lot of potential for that. But otherwise, I think it's fine. It's not, I don't think it's as great as people say it is, just because it's, the classic. And again, I'm gonna get so much hate for saying that, but it's not like the most sophisticated thing you'll ever watch. You might even, kind of roll your eyes a bit at some of the comedy. It's very cheesy, I guess, is what I'm working towards. So for that, I'll put it at like maybe a low Succulent for right now. It's definitely better than the cartoon. The cinematography at least tried to like give it some life so that it's not all just like wide shots or full shots of characters standing and talking. Right, next up is Beast Wars. Now, I have a confession to make. I have not ever seen this show. So by all accounts, it will be going here by default. But if I have, actually watch the show through. From what I understand, at least, it would probably be mythical tier. I hear it's very, compelling. It's a very small cast of characters. I hear that it's very good, and it has the potential to be better than these, I think, especially with how minimal its cast is. The smaller you condense the cast, the stronger the characters will become. It's just sort of something that, as we'll see later on, this franchise really struggles with. But I will give Beast Wars credit. It gets a theoretical mythical tier, just not like the fully realized. It's like the Plato's like World of Forms version of mythical tier, just not quite like the actual bit of perfection. Okay, we're gonna run on the any percent hate speedrun and say for Transformers Animated, I haven't watched it fully either, but I've seen at least a good number of clips, so like I know that this show is very good. I'm not the biggest fan of the animation style. I think the proportions of the characters are a little wonky. Putting the animation and the designs aside, the story is great. The characters are great. I think the further the show gets, the better that it gets, especially when the Decepticons are fully realized. From what I understand about the first season and the clips I've watched, it's mostly like human antagonists, which isn't the most great thing in the world, but the Decepticons are trying to rebuild their leader, Megatron, and that there's this whole plot going on with that. I think that's a really unique spin on the story a bit, to have Megatron be out of the game, but when he comes back, he is a badass. He's a machine. He is a machine, but a machine in the sense that he's this murderous, calculating, cold figure that all Decepticons are terribly afraid of. Predating what we're about to look at with Transformers Prime, this has a really strong handle on its drama. So for that, it deserves my mythical tier. Alright, next up on the chopping block, we got Transformers Prime. This is an easy mythical tier, no questions asked. It's not the most perfectly written or directed show ever, by no means, but I think it's in competition with animated. I've seen more of Transformers Prime. I've seen it basically to completion. I know how this show ends. I just don't know the fabrics that sew it together as well and as intimately as I do with Transformers Prime. I think this show borders on keeping kids awake at night or having nightmares about some of the stuff it does. It's not like horror by any means, but it does tend to be very violent. It's in the veins of the Michael Bay movies that we're about to rank in a couple of minutes. It knows its characters well. I think its development is on par with animated, sometimes better, sometimes maybe not so much. The standout characters for me are Ratchet, the Autobot medic. He is amazing. He's like an archetype that I really like, a character who meets a group of people who are fundamentally just inferior in his eyes, the human species, and over time he watches them grow, watches them sort of living their lives. He sees how they bond with their Autobot companions, and he begins to respect them and even care for them. And seeing him develop in that way in the show is so amazing, to the point where he's the caretaker of the humans in the movie that's next up on our list, which I think is just really great. So the show handles him well. The Decepticons also in this show are god tier. You got your standard Megatron, of course. Starscream in this show is great. He's super entertaining. You got Knockout, who is he just is. There's no amount of words that I can use to describe him as a character. Transformers Prime, its story, its drama, its animation's pretty good. There are things about it that I don't like, but overall, it's super solid, mythical tier.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Alright, so Beast Hunters is next. Now, this is a movie that was associated with Transformers Prime. I put this in, I don't know, tier maybe, passable. It's not bad. It's definitely not as bad as what's coming up, but it's it's fine, you know, it continues off of where the show leaves off, and I forgot to mention, this show has a really great ending. It's a very satisfying payoff for the characters. It leaves them all in a place that's open-ended, but conclusive. It has a nice ending too, but I don't think I am as pleased with how it ends. It doesn't really leave the characters off in places that are particularly compelling, especially just because of like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel satisfying to me. So yeah, Beast Hunters is fine. It's just not great. What's that you say? How did the tier list inexplicably become larger in between takes? Anyway, continuing onward, this is the meat and potatoes of why anybody would ever want to make a Transformers tier list. The first one, Transformers from 2007, is a movie that exists. It's fine. I don't hate it. I don't love it. Its writing is alright. I think it could definitely have benefited from being more about the characters, but this movie did pioneer the technology for like practical CGI, like, you know, all the stuff that you see in movies now. It's because of this movie that we got Iron Man, because Jon Favreau saw what Michael Bay did and he was like, oh, we could, you know, make that work for Iron Man, and, you know, now we have an MCU. So maybe this movie, you know, deserves credit. I think it's passable. I would not put it past, maybe past this Beast Hunters movie. You know, it's pretty cringe sometimes, not gonna lie. Way too human-centric, but the humans are at least entertaining and not, you know, really cringe-inducing to watch, whereas the actual Transformers in this movie, they're kind of just there for the action scenes, and they're all right. It definitely hasn't aged well, but it's fine. You know, it's fine. Passable. You can watch it. You won't be too offended. Transformers Revenge of the Fallen is an abhorrent, ungodly smear of shit that doesn't deserve to even exist, but here we are. Easy Ultimate Sigma tier. It's not even cinema. It doesn't belong on a list that says Transformers movies, because it's not a movie. It's a collection of events that have been edited together and dialogue was written. Whether or not it makes any sense is another story. It'll numb your mind. It might put you to sleep, possibly comatose state. It's on the table. The Transformers in this movie are pretty non-characters. Like, you could honestly probably find a way to edit them out of the movie if you really tried. And you would still have a movie. It wouldn't be good, but it would be shorter. So, Dark of the Moon is considered the second best movie, I think, by most people. I would second that, but not for the reasons that you probably would think. It tries to take itself seriously. I think its first act is a complete and utter joke that doesn't warrant its own existence. Parts of the second act are pretty weak too, but once you get to the third act, you have this like hour-long city siege and battle. It's at least like dramatic and watchable, but it just doesn't understand what it's doing. It's also the movie that made Optimus Prime a murdering psychopath as he executes his former mentor at point-blank range as he begs for his life, which is just not something that Optimus Prime would ever do. Everybody is unhinged. Everybody is on edge. Everybody's screaming about everything. The main character, Sam Witwicky, is unbearable. This is the last Michael Bay movie that he was in, I think, but damn, it really shows how it took a toll on him. Like, oh my god, this movie is just... It's just unhinged. That's really the best way to describe it. So there's Dark of the Moon for you, beta tier, easily, like low beta tier probably. Age of Extinction. So imagine for a second that you're watching like Avengers Endgame, but it's really bad and it's like painful. But you know that it's a climb to get to the end credits. You know that there's this long road ahead of you, but you want to stick it out because, you know, maybe it will get better as it goes on. That's this movie. Age of Extinction is 2 hours and 45 minutes long, and it is just so bad. It introduces a whole new cast of characters and kills off like basically everybody off screen. So, you know, that's a great premise to start with, you know, because that worked so well for Star Wars when they did that with the sequels. The first hour is just exposition and it sort of deviates off course. We have like this villain who's a bounty hunter named Lockdown, and he like is working with the humans to catch the Autobots. All of a sudden we're introduced to this multi-billion-dollar corporation that like builds its own Transformers, and they become like the main antagonists. But then Lockdown shows up anyway, so then we like chase after him and like, you know, save our friends. And then the corporation's back again, and it's like, ooh, we're gonna do something evil, because like, well no, but like the Decepticons become evil because magic. And then like, they have a battle, but then Lockdown shows up at the end of that. It's like it can't decide what it wants to do. And every character in this movie is the same, needlessly like, cruel. It's probably worse than Revenge of the Fallen. I mean, Revenge of the Fallen wasn't written, but it isn't as long. It has mercy on you as a viewer, because even though it takes its time through the last like 30 minutes, it feels like that's like an hour worth of like film you're watching. This movie leads you on. You know, it's like a deceptive like partner in a relationship. They lead you on into thinking that there's hope, and then it just cuts off any semblance of hope. You know, it bait and switches you, essentially. That's what this movie is. So, and last we've made it to Transformers: The Last Night. This movie is, oh boy. This one is like one of the shortest, actually, which is really funny because about an hour's worth of deleted scenes were cut. So if like there are enough Transformers fans cried out, there could be like a Bay cut or something for this movie. But no one would go to see it because, you know, the franchise kind of died after this. I actually, on rewatch, enjoyed this the most out of all the movies, which just cracks me up. The Last Night is the point where they just decided that they were going to redo everything and branch off and make a cinematic universe. The Transformers wanted to have like 40 movies, I think they were saying, which is nuts. They all got canceled, by the way, because this movie absolutely bombed. It lost billions of dollars, I think, at the box office, which is astounding. It's terrible. Its characters are caricatures, you know, that's something that we've seen before. Everybody's the same character. They're just copy and pasted in different bodies, and they have different like ways they deliver dialogue, but they're all the same character. The Decepticons are absolutely nothing in this movie. They're introduced like in a Suicide Squad style intro, which is maximum cringe, and then they die like 2 scenes later. The only one that I like, and part of the reason that I have a soft spot for this movie, is Barricade. He's the police car guy from the first movie. He's back and he looks really cool. It's a stupid reason, but it's a little bit of bias that I can't let go of as much as I want, because he looks cool. But the movie is, if you were to like get really drunk, this movie would be hilarious. I guarantee you. By the end of it, it has some of the worst screenwriting ever. Like, dialogue is abhorrent in this movie, but with a little bit of alcohol, I bet you it would be a time and a half. So for that reason alone, I'm gonna bump it above Revenge of the Fallen is an edge better than these, but this movie definitely is better than Age of Extinction. Probably not objectively. You'd have to really go into the details, which I don't think anybody wants to do, but it's shorter, so it's better. And at last, we've emerged from Tartarus. We finally reached Mount Olympus, the precipice of the cinematic Transformers films. We have Bumblebee, which is just a love letter to the franchise, a nice refreshing breather, a character-driven melodrama between a human and an Autobot who are going through this period of self-discovery, like literally for Bumblebee, but the main character Charlie, like more of a metaphorical way. And then you got, the Decepticons and the humans hunting them down, because like basically the Iron Giant, which I guess you could say the movie's like biggest issue really is its derivative of like 80s movies like the Iron Giant. But I don't think that makes it bad though. It's a very nice movie. It's more toned down, but it feels like it has a soul, which none of these movies feel like they have a soul. The choreography and the fight scenes is amazing. I don't want to go out on the limb and say it's well written though, because I have my problems with its structure. I think that the second act is really, really weak because Bumblebee and Charlie basically go around committing crimes for like an hour, while the Decepticons stand at computers and type and stuff, and then eventually they find them because he sticks his finger in an outlet because, plot. But the third act is really good when they, they have a battle and everything. And the opening scene, oh my god, the opening scene of this movie. It's a battle on Cybertron. It follows the Autobots mounting a desperate escape, and the Decepticons are all chasing them down. And it's just a really well-directed scene. I'm not going to go out on a limb and say it's the most perfect movie ever. It is absolutely not even close. But I rewatched this and I put a huge smile on my face by doing so. So this is like an easy mythical tier for me. Where it goes in mythical, we can figure that out later. I'm gonna gander probably here is probably fine. Now before we continue on into the War for Cybertron trilogy, I'd like to first address these because this is gonna be very quick. I have not seen any of these shows, so they're literally like the reason that they weren't on the list to begin with is because I forgot that they even existed, and then I remembered and I was like, but I haven't even seen them. So they're basically just filler for the bottom tier. I have no ambition to watch any of them. I've heard that Cybertron and Armada are good. Energon I've heard is abhorrent. That's Energon right there. And Robots in Disguise I've heard mixed things about. They're just there for the memes, basically, so they can stick around. Now, if we want to do this in terms of chronological order, like release date, it would actually be like this. Alright, Robots in Disguise. It's the sequel to Transformers Prime. This show runs off of that whole premise, and it's following Bumblebee as the leader of the Autobots. And it's your standard kids show. I don't really think the writing is all around that good. I have not seen all of it by any means. I've only seen bits and pieces of it, but I know it isn't well liked. However, I still think it's better than these. Definitely better than these, but not. I don't think it's above Darker Than Noon. Cyberverse, an improvement on Robots in Disguise. I watched the first season through. I don't think it was the best viewing experience ever, but it was a little bit of entertainment. I kind of got lost in the second season. It got a little boring after a while. It kind of was feeding off of like one-off episodes. Filler, basically, just filler. Now I heard it gets better. I did not watch it all the way through. I don't know if I want to watch it all the way through, but I think it's, it's fine. I think it's fine. I'm gonna put it here. And at last we've reached Transformers War for Cybertron. Siege is, it's a show that exists. It's not really the most elegantly written thing ever. It's certainly fine. It takes itself way too seriously. I think its humor is actually very well done, but the scenes where it's trying to give gravity to its situations, it completely falls apart because it's obsessed with darkness. Like, its dialogue is basically like, if you want to watch this show, you have to speed it up to 1.25 speed, or else you are going to lose your mind. Because
every single line of dialogue is slower and more dramatic than the last.
And it's like, it never ends. It never ends. It's like that the whole way through all 3 seasons of the, it's just, it never stops. And just for that alone, it makes it like really hard to watch. The thing that it struggles with the most is its world building. This show was knee deep in like really graphic, situations. Handling this war between like classes basically, and trying to explore the lore of Cybertron, how Megatron rose up from the gladiatorial arena to become this political figurehead who rose up like basically fascism on Cybertron to form the Decepticons. We don't see any of that. We begin in the middle of the war, when it's the waning hours for the Autobots. They're at their last limb, devoid of energon and resources to survive. But the show should have, I think, been about the rise and fall of Megatron. And especially because he's honestly the show's best character. He's the most interesting, at least. Seeing him, sort of change his mentality and work with all these characters around him who have a different understanding of how things should be done, like Shockwave or Starscream, and have them be negative influences on him that eventually lead him to become the monster that we all know and love him as. Rather, we jump in the middle of that development and we don't really get any kind of recognition of it. They try to play off of it as if we should care, but we don't. Siege is competent. It's not bad. It is something that I could rewatch, but I don't want to say that it's good. So I'm gonna put it in high beta, I think. You know what? I don't want to put it there. I'm gonna put it here. I'm gonna bump Beast Hunters down. No, I don't know. We'll fix that at the end. We'll do a fixing session. All right, War for Cybertron: Earthrise. When I first watched this, I thought it was an improvement on Siege. I thought that it was better paced. It was interesting to see sort of the aftermath of the final battle. The introduction of the Quintesson was really, really good and graphic. Like, it genuinely shocked me when I saw that. That was cool. The more that you look into it, Earthrise is ridden with problems. It doesn't show the Autobots who escaped on the ship for 2 whole episodes, and it spends all its time on its cast on Cybertron. Then it forgets about those characters that it established in the first 2 episodes for the whole show until the last 2 episodes, and then it unceremoniously kills off all these characters off screen in this scene to basically wipe clean their slate, so that they can just focus on the characters who are going to be on Earth. Very poor choice in writing that makes it feel unfulfilled. It doesn't feel like anything was really gained from the stuff on Cybertron. It's just not that interesting. I don't really know what the point of it was. It just feels like it's a waste of time. So it's going to go in beta. Alright, we made it at last. Hopefully you all are still here, because this is quite a climb just to get to Kingdom of All Things. It's such an underwhelming finale. It's trying to be a springboard to the multiverse, but it fails fundamentally at doing that. It doesn't make it interesting. It just sort of uses it to pull Galvatron from the 1986 movie, which actually is kind of a neat little full circle tie-in to the beginning of our list, but it pulls him as the main antagonist of this show, just out of thin air, for the final episode only. He's not in any of the other episodes, except one in Earthrise. You're not. I have seen you, unfortunately. There's no escape from you. Alright, well, we're just gonna leave you hanging for right now. And it hasn't earned that at all. But on top of that, we go back to Cybertron. Why are we back here? I thought the plan was to escape and find, like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't really feel like it's the ending that this show has been working towards. Lucky for this trilogy, it's going up against this splotch on Transformers' reputation. So it's not as bad as Dark of the Moon, I don't think. But it's not that good either. I forgot to mention it also, the Beast Wars cast is in this. This was my first experience of these characters, like, in animation. So, you know, that leaves a sour taste in my mouth too. So I want to watch this show just to sort of clear their name. But yeah, that's everything. So let's clean this list up and call it a day. Alright, so after some careful consideration, this is our completed tier list. In our haven't seen yet tier, we've got Beast Wars, the Cybertron trilogy, and the original Robots in Disguise. Ultimate Sigma tier, we moved the new Robots in Disguise show down because I was feeling particularly sadistic today and figured I would make that show suffer as much as possible. Beta tier, I bumped Dark of the Moon ahead of Kingdom and Earthrise. I know I said that Kingdom and Earthrise were better, but after thinking about it, I think Dark of the Moon, it rounds off just a hair better. Passable tier is the 2007 movie. I think Siege and Cyberverse, you could make an argument for one being better than the other. I think they're about equal, at least from what I've seen of Cyberverse. And the 2007 movie's fine. Succulent tier, we bumped Beast Wars up there. And the G1 cartoon, I think again, the movie is peak Succulent tier. I just don't think it edges its way into Mythical. That's just me. I know people are going to disagree, but hot take, here we go. And last but not least, of course, we have our Mythical tier. Bumblebee, the movie is way at the back. It's the best movie in the Transformers series, just from a pure objective writing standpoint. But Transformers Prime and Animated are telling stories that are way out of Bumblebee's league. Animated and Prime are both, you know, mature in their own way. Not as mature as Bumblebee because it gets to have a PG-13 rating. But both of them as shows are incredibly competent, and I think given the time they have to tell the story they want to tell, they really nail down what they're trying to tell. So it really just becomes the final grudge match between Animated or Prime. And even though I've watched more of Transformers Prime, I know from what I have watched of Animated the promise that it shows as a show. And it's something that I want to, you know, rewatch and complete in full when I have the time, along with Beast Wars. Those are the two that I think are probably among the best shows in the Transformers franchise and among the best content. So, in lieu of Rise of the Beasts coming to us next June, I will probably come back and, you know, find a place to put that movie. I really hope it's at least Succulent tier, but we can only hope for so much. So that is all for my Transformers tier list. Thank you all very much for watching. I know it was a bit of a longer video, so if you made it this far or skipped to the end of the video so you could see the final tier list, thank you for watching, you know, what you did watch, and I appreciate it truly. This is something a little out of left field, but I like tier lists, so it's one of those things I'll come back to every once in a while to vary up the content that I make. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing if you haven't already. Definitely leave a like if you got a kick out of this one, so comment away. Other than that, expect more content in the future. This has been Mono Mythical, and I'll catch you all later.